Sonali.
Hello.
Glad to have you here today. And I would like to discuss a little more about, the youth population and the key issues around it. As we know that, India is almost more than 50% of young population. And we also know that they're vulnerable to violence, discrimination, and other biases and stereotyping. From civil societies, we have seen that there has been investment, in terms of resources and content, but the uptake of those has not been that much which we would like to see, and the outcome and impact of it. How do you, from your point of view, that what are those things we are missing out? What would we do more to see that the outcomes are more, in terms of larger safety and security of the young population?
I think it's a very all-comprehensive and a rather tough question to try and answer. But since we are trying to look at a perspective, what I really think important is to understand with which perspective are we looking at young people. Most of the time you see them as children, they become adults very quickly. So then adult responsibilities are there. And all through childhood and early adolescence, you're preparing for that. And what is the way we conceptualize? So you have to put in education, you have to get through school, college, maybe some technical learning. Then you have, that's the primary thing. And then there are other factors like health, taking care of health. What doesn't come into consideration are certain other important factors of what it means to be young in India. And I think we spent 2 days really understanding the issues around sexual and reproductive health. Right. Many a time this is reduced to just reproductive health.
Right.
And we may say the larger sort of concept, but it just gets to the whole idea of managing procreation and the reproductive system, as it were. But I think young people are far more complex, and there are many more things that form their identity, including the sexual identity, their needs, which are very, very strong at this point. I'm not saying it's not there otherwise, but it sort of is there, and it needs to be addressed. So I think the perception is the problem more than anything else. And therefore what we see, and then you look at what kind of programs and projects you're running. You're running livelihood projects, you're running educational improvement projects, you run scholarship projects, and then you look at the funding for the other stuff. It hardly exists. Right. So I think there is a lot of need, and if you talk to young people, it's kind of eye-opening.
Right.
And they will speak about all of these things,
right,
which is not the case, because most of the time in our development narrative, we describe development in a particular way, which either has to increase income, has to reduce risk, but we are not looking at what reduction of risk actually means in effect. Is a more healthy and more, capable community of young people, which means all of these things.
Sure. So as you rightly said, last 2 days we have been really dialoguing, debating among each other, looking at a lot of the key problem areas and the solutions. But I think what came out was also that intergeneration communication as one of the gaps. And what I think I would like to hear from you a little more is those very innovative and disruptive thinking that you say, because I think people need to hear them and understand them more, that where all from how we can approach and reach the key populations.
So for mine, and I must put it out front, it's been a journey both as a professional, because my background is working a lot on gender thematic issues, but also as a parent. Both my kids are now 17 and 24, and I've been singularly challenged as not just as a parent, but as an individual who has grown up in a pretty different kind of circumstance. Right. Now with all the digital world, information that's so much easily accessible, there are more different norms around sexuality, openness of conversation, and also my own parenting, because I came from a time where there was not much, so I allowed more more freedom.
Right.
So all of this has really been an interesting journey to then understand what intergenerational conversation actually means.
Sure.
And I think there's discomfort on both sides. In fact, there was a little bit of an aha moment at the end of the 2 days which came from another suggestion, if you remember it. One side, the older generation is very uncomfortable talking about sexuality or sex or whatever about the younger generation. If you flip it, I think there's a lot of discomfort among the younger people to think maybe the older guys are sexually active or have different kinds of challenges. They also face discomfort.
Correct.
Now, I was thinking to myself, it was really for me also to think, hey, let's take a step back. Let's not say it's only about me with all my grey hair thinking about what's going on with young people. Let's enable them. Let's have all these difficult conversations. But I think the reverse is also true. And
Right.
if we were to think about it like this, I think it will probably completely spin the conversation.
Right.
And I think this is very, very important. And we've had really some very interesting conversations, but I just like to mention, I think one more point is I think both sides will have to have a level of empathy, a level of being non-judgmental and open. If we don't bring this to the conversation, then intergenerational conversation is not possible.
Yes.
And to assume that the benefit is only for one side is also wrong. Because we have most of the time, I know even in our conversation, we said, okay, we'll do all of this, the beneficiary is the youth. I don't think this is the approach around sexuality.
Right.
If I can be more free in how I think about sexuality, whether it's my own or about a youth, I feel free as well.
Sure. Exactly.
And as women, we know.
Yeah.
We have faced taboos around mobility, around self-expression, how we dress, all of that. And you and me sitting here could be counted as much more empowered and able to say things which many other women can't talk about, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we feel very free.
Yes.
And we feel that gives us so much of energy, right?
Yeah.
And be able to do stuff. So I think that was an important thing to bring to the table, is that, which will allow both sides to breathe.
Correct. And I think that it's a great point when you say feeling very free, but at the same time, if you're being judged also, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
That empowerment, when it comes, it really kind of matters. And I think that has to be in both the sides, both the children or the young population and the older generation. So thank you so much, Sonali. That was very, very interesting. And I hope we keep the conversation alive.
We should, because if we don't, then we lose out on our own future and the future of the next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you.